From cover to cover, she'll find every pearl. Welcome to Jenny Reads the World.
Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny and it is that time. It is time to tell you about my top 24 reads of 2024. Okay, so what I've done is I have broken these down by category. So I'm going to give you my top by category, not necessarily in order of like my 24th favorite book all the way up to my first favorite book, because I don't think I could possibly rank them that way. Category number 1, mystery thriller, and book number 1 is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This one follows Kit. Kit is a 30-ish-year-old caregiver. She does at-home health care, and she has been hired to be the caretaker for Lenora Hope. Lenora has, she's an elderly woman. She's had a stroke. Kit moves into the house. She's also kind of going through a pretty rough time in her life. So this is a great opportunity for her, not only to have a job, but to have a place to live. So she moves in, she starts taking care of Lenora, and she quickly finds out that Lenora is desperate to tell her some story. But because she can't speak, they have to try and figure out a way for Lenora to get her story across to her. And then even once Kit does learn Lenora's story, if she tells people about it, will anyone believe her? Because Kit has also got a few skeletons in her closet. Okay, book number 2, Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. This follows Louise. Louise is kind of an underappreciated, overworked single mother, and she starts to have an affair with her boss. Her boss's name is David. Almost at exactly the same time, she meets and basically becomes best friends with David's wife, Adele. So she's having an affair with David, becomes best friends with David's wife. So she is hearing about all of the troubles in their marriage, both from David and from Adele. And as you can imagine, their accounts are very different. Which one is to be believed? Number 3 is Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This treasure of a book is perhaps less thriller and more cozy mystery. So this follows our main character, Vera Wong. Vera is an aging Chinese lady. She owns a kind of falling into disrepair tea house in San Francisco, and Vera has a very regimented and structured view of life. But one morning she comes downstairs to do her morning routine, and she discovers a dead body in the middle of her tea house. As anyone would do, she calls the police. The police come and investigate and determine that it was an accidental death. It was a natural death. But Vera is absolutely convinced that it was a murder. So she begins to do her investigation because she obviously believes that she will do a better job than the police. Along the way, she meets a lot of really quirky and interesting characters. This has a really strong theme of found family. I'm here for it. Our next genre is romance. So book number 4, first book in our romance category, is the ROM Commers by Katherine Center. So all of the books that I have in my romance category meet 2 big criteria that are essential to me in a good romance. 1, they're funny. I have to have a laugh. And 2, their characters have real problems. If you want to lose me in a romance, the first thing you do is you have the miscommunication trope, which is, all of our problems could be solved if we would just bother to have a 2-minute conversation with each other. I cannot stand that, and I will lose interest in a book immediately if that is all you've got going for you. So the ROM Commers by Katherine Center follows our main character, Emma. Emma is an aspiring rom-com screenplay writer, and she is caretaking for her sick father, but she becomes convinced by her best friend, who is also her agent, to leave her sick father in the care of her sister, who is, a little younger and maybe not as mature, so that she can go to California for 6 weeks to work with a man who is basically her favorite screenplay writer, who is trying to write a rom-com, but he is not traditionally a rom-com writer. He doesn't actually like rom-coms. He doesn't want to be writing a rom-com. He's been kind of forced by the studio to do it. And he definitely does not want her help, and he does not want her to be there. Next up, Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I will say this one obviously meets my two criteria that I mentioned, but it might almost go too far in the sense that if you are wanting some sort of really light, fluffy, Hallmark-esque type of romance, this really might not be for you. The problems that are facing these characters are big ones, and it's not so lighthearted that you're just gonna like wander off into the fluffiness. This follows Justin and Emma. Emma is a traveling nurse, and she meets Justin because Justin posts this like really funny Reddit post. Emma responds to his post. They start having conversations on the side, and they decide that they want to meet up. So Emma's a traveling nurse, and she decides to take a post at a hospital in Justin's town, but it's just for the summer. So she's only going to be in his town for a few months, and then she's going to move on to her next assignment. So it really kind of turns into, is this relationship going to develop into one where Emma's willing to give up her traveling transient lifestyle and stay put? Or will Justin be persuaded to leave his little cute hometown and follow her out onto a world of adventures? Next up, The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. So I'm going to call this the most lighthearted of the romances that we're going to talk about today, with the caveat that it starts with our main character, Delphi, choking to death on a gas station hamburger. So it begins with Delphi dying. That's the start of the book. It's lighthearted and fluffy. But anyway, Delphi gets to the other side. She meets her afterlife therapist, who is there to kind of help her transition from life to the afterlife. But while she's there and she's kind of in the like waiting room, she meets this man who's in the same type of place. They have this immediate chemistry. She feels like, this man is my soulmate. I've waited 27 years, never fell in love on earth. And here I am on the first day of death, and I meet this man. But the man is not actually dead. He's just in a coma. So boom, she meets him, and no sooner than she meets him, he gets sent back to Earth. Delphi's afterlife's therapist, she's a romantic, and she's kind of bored. So she decides that she is going to give Delphi a challenge, that Delphi can go back to Earth. Nobody knows that Delphi's dead yet. They haven't found her dead on her living room floor. So she can go back to Earth, and she will have 10 days to find this man based only on his first name in the city of London. No problem. And if she can find him and get him to kiss her in 10 days, then she can stay on Earth with her soulmate. And if not, she's got to go back to the afterlife. Okay, now we're going to move into perhaps a slightly more serious set of category, which is historical fiction. I've read so many really good historical fiction books this year that I've broken this into two categories. So category one is going to be historical fiction that was not based in World War II. So in that category, first up is The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. This bounces around multiple timelines and multiple points of view. It begins in 1962. We're following this indigenous family of berry pickers, migrant workers basically, in rural Maine. And one day, the youngest member of their family, a girl named Ruthie, aged 4, disappears while the family is out doing their berry picking. And it basically follows the family and also just kind of bounces around in different timelines. The family tries to get help from the police. The police don't care at all about this indigenous family. Kind of, it's your own problem. You're migrants. We don't care. And it's really interesting and powerful to see the impact that this had for generations to come on this family. Okay, next up, book number 8, Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. This is another pretty heavy one, folks. So this is based on the true story of the Tennessee Children's Home and its matriarch, Georgia Tann. The first time I ever heard of Georgia Tann was on a true crime show basically in the context of the most prolific serial killers of the 20th century. Georgia ran an orphanage, where she was more than happy to steal and then sell children to wealthy families. If the children did not behave or she wasn't able to sell them for the price that she wanted, it was likely that the children would not be seen or heard from again. So this begins in 1939 and it follows Rill Foss. Rill is a 12-year-old blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, and she lives on a riverboat with her parents and her 4 younger siblings. One day her parents leave Rill and the kids, and they go to the hospital because they're going to go have another baby. Shortly thereafter, 2 men arrive and they tell her, hey, your mom died in childbirth, your dad can't handle you, so he signed you over to us. And he takes them to the orphanage. And the rest of the story is essentially about their experience, not only while they're in the orphanage, but what happens to them, you know, kind of as they go. The First Ladies by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. This book is also set in the 1930s. And this follows First Lady of the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt, and her friendship with the First Lady of the Civil Rights Movement, Mary McLeod Bethune. So if you are at all interested in the history of women in the United States or people of color, you should read this book, 100%. This was really good. I will not tell you this was the fastest paced book that I read. It definitely was not. It was a slower pace. But I learned a lot from reading this book. Something I like about historical fiction is that I learn a lot of history that way, and I like history. It's really a lot about the politics of it as well. So like you have these 2 women who it was borderline illegal for them to be friends, certainly to be in certain public places together, and how they navigated that relationship, how they navigated the politics of their kind of separate but together issues as we were getting ready to go into the World War and the Depression and all of these things that were going on. Book number 10, The Women by Kristen Hanna. Is Kristen Hanna capable of writing a book that doesn't rip your heart out and leaves you in a sobbing mess on the floor? Because I'm not entirely certain that she is capable of such a thing. And this book is no exception. This book begins in 1965. And our main character is a woman named Frankie. Frankie comes from a wealthy family in California. Her dad has this wall of heroes, essentially, in his office that is men who have served. And it has never really occurred to Frankie, or anyone for that matter, that she could go serve, right? Women don't do that. Women stay home, they keep the home fires burning. It begins essentially at a going away party for her brother. Her brother is getting ready to go off to the Vietnam War, and a friend of her brother's is there. And he's also going off to war. And he's like, hey, you could go be a nurse in the war. And it has never occurred to Frankie that she could do this. Well, much to her family's chagrin, very unhappy with this decision, she decides to go and enlist. Then she finds herself treating war wounds in Vietnam, and she is hopelessly in over her head. And it is a terrifying awakening for her. Okay, now we're moving into the historical fiction, World War II section. First up, book number 11 of my list is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This follows multiple viewpoints, but mainly those of Marie Laure, a young blind girl in Paris. She lives with her father, and also Werner, a young orphan boy who is living in rural Germany. How can these 2 stories become so incredibly intertwined? How can these 2 people navigate and survive the war? That is a big part of what this is. This is about, you're kind of seeing these 2 seemingly really distinct stories and how they are intertwined. And it was very, very good. The Librarian of Burned Books by Brianna Labuskes. This follows 3 women across 3 different timelines. Our first one is Althea. Althea is an American journalist, and her story starts in 1933. She goes from the US to Berlin on a cultural tour and encounters some culture she was definitely not expecting. Next up is Hannah. Hannah is a German Jew. She has escaped Germany in 1936 and has gone to Paris, but has now, of course, discovered that Paris is not the safe haven that she was expecting it to be. She finds herself working at the German Library of Burned Books. Finally is Vivian. Vivian is a New York woman. Her story is in 1944. Her husband has died in the war, and she is now basically trying to keep books going from the US to the soldiers overseas. And she is kind of fighting against the politics of nothing that could potentially be controversial, which is all books. So it's fascinating to see, one, how all three of these stories ultimately end up intertwined, and the power of the written word in fighting a war. So top notch. Book number 13, The Things We Cannot See by Kelly Rimmer. So my coworker and I read this together, and we were just constantly pinging each other, trying to figure out where each other was so we could talk about the book. And as soon as I finished, I immediately emailed my mom and was like, you must read this. This begins in 1942, and it follows a Polish teenager, Alina, and her fiance, Tomasz. They are navigating the Nazi occupation of Poland. This also bounces back, so it's dual point of view, and it bounces back and forth between 1942 and modern times. And the modern time story, we're following Alice. Alice is a stressed out mother. She has 2 kids, one of whom is an autistic, nonverbal boy. And she's also trying to take care of her grandmother who is dying. She's had a stroke. She is also now not able to speak. And her grandmother is desperately trying to tell her some story, but she can't communicate with her very well. So it's trying to figure out what her grandmother's trying to tell her and what does this have to do with Alina and Tomasz in 1942. This was excellent. Okay, now we're gonna move into kind of more the general fiction section. So first up is A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. This is set in Sweden, and it follows an older gentleman named Ove. Ove's wife has recently passed away, and she was his whole life. And now that she is gone, he just doesn't want to go on anymore. And he has a very, very specific and strict point of view of what is right and what is wrong. And he has no problem telling you that what you're doing is wrong. But he'll also be the first person to come and help you. And he'll probably complain and moan the entire time, but he's going to come help you. He's going to make sure that the job gets done right. And in the course of doing this, he meets his new neighbors. And this, again, kind of has that theme of found family that I love so much. And it is one of the most heartwarming reads that I've read in a really long time. You're going to want to go and hug everybody that you know. Okay, book number 15 is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. So this is another book a little on the heavy side. So this starts with Nora. Nora is a young woman who has experienced her fair share of loss and hardship, and she's genuinely depressed. And again, she's kind of decided she just doesn't want to go on anymore. And in the course of, frankly, attempting to take her own life, she finds herself in the Midnight Library. So the Midnight Library is a place where she is essentially presented with all of these different books, and each book represents what her life would look like if she had made a different choice. So for example, if she had decided to marry her high school boyfriend instead of, breaking up with him and going on with her life. She is just completely overwhelmed with regret, and it gives her a chance to see what her life would be like. All of these things, if she had done things differently, but all these things that she regretted. Ultimately, this book is really a lot about, finding out that life's not perfect no matter what you decide to do, and not necessarily being happy with, but finding happiness and finding purpose in your life. Okay, number 16, The Wishing Game by Meg Shaffer. I'm gonna call this slightly less heavy than these other stories. So this follows Lucy. Lucy's 26. She's working as a teacher's aide, and she has one wish, one goal in life, and that is to adopt a 7-year-old boy who is in her class. But she's not wealthy. She's working as a teacher's aide. She's living with numerous roommates. She has debt. There is no way anybody is going to allow her to adopt a child. So one day, Lucy receives an invitation to participate in this very exclusive contest. It is being held by, kind of think of this as a little bit Willy Wonka, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So it's being held by this eccentric book author who has written her favorite book series, and she is going to go to Clock Island, which is where the author lives, and she's going to participate in a series of games. And she, along with this other small group of people, whoever wins, basically they're going to have a wish granted for them. Moving on, number 17, we're making it through. Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. If we could offer an award for the most charming book of 2024, I would vote that it goes to Remarkably Bright Creatures. So All you really need to know is that one of the main characters of this book is Marcellus. Marcellus is a giant Pacific octopus in the local city aquarium, and he is everything. He alone makes the story. Now you're gonna like the rest of the book too, but Marcellus, he really holds the story together. Go read. Okay, Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. You could probably argue that this one also could go in historical fiction, but I'm the one who made this list, so I can put it where I want it. This one begins at the will reading of Eleanor Bennett. Eleanor has passed away, and now her children, Byron and Benny, are hearing her will, and Eleanor has left behind a recording basically telling them about her life before she had children, and it does not in any way jive with what they thought her mother's life, or what their mother's life was. This one has a lot of like really interesting cultural references to the Caribbean islands. It has a lot of themes around, you know, how food plays such a strong part in our culture. You know, it really kind of makes you think about what your parents might have been like before you came along, and how they're not always the people that you think they might be. Last in this section is The Bookshop on the Corner by Jenny Colgan. One could argue that this is romance too, but again, I made this list. So this is another really super charming read. I think I love this so much in part because this is the dream. So this follows Nina. Nina is a British librarian. She's in her 20s, and she basically becomes redundant at work. They're restructuring and they let her go. So she decides that what she's gonna do is she's gonna open up a mobile bookshop. She goes and she gets a van, she fills it up with books, and she drives it up into Scotland and starts selling books in these little small towns that really they don't have a library, they don't have bookshops, they're kind of cut off from the rest of the world. She just meets the most fun characters along the way. It's really also a very, very charming read. So definitely The Bookshop on the Corner. Okay, moving on, we're gonna go into fantasy now. So the first one is the Light Lark series, which is Light Lark, Nightbane, and Skyshade by Alex Astor. So this kind of has a lot of those same themes and tropes that I like, which is games and trials and found family. This definitely has both of them. So this is a fantasy world that is cursed. And every 100 years, they hold a centennial with the hopes of breaking the curse. And the only way to break the curse is for the leader, the ruler of one of the 6 realms within this kingdom to die. They have to die. But not only will they, if the ruler dies, the whole kingdom dies. This mainly follows Isla. Isla is the queen of the wildling. Is she going to be able to basically lift the curse without dying and, you know, killing all of the wildlings with her? Okay, next up, One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. I loved this so much that even though I read these books on my Kindle, I made my boyfriend go buy me forced him to do this, to go buy me the special editions at Barnes & Noble for my birthday. Really heavy, actually. Look at this. They're pretty, it's shockingly heavy. Like, I don't know what they put in these books, but they're really heavy. They're so pretty. She's a beaut, Clark. Really pretty. Anyway, the tagline of this is, Elsbeth needs a monster. The monster might be her. Love it. Okay, so yes. So this is following Elsbeth. Elsbeth is a young woman. She's living in this magical kingdom. There's basically 2 different kinds of magic that exist. The first type of magic exists solely in cards. Like, you have to be the possessor of a card. The card will allow you to do a very specific type of magic. There's a cost to use the card. So for example, you could own a scythe card. That will kind of allow you to control somebody else, that you can enter their mind and make them do what you want them to do. You're going to feel excruciating pain though while you're doing this. So there's the checks and balances to it. And this is considered to be the approved type of magic. You're allowed to do this. Now, to be fair, the vast majority of the cards are owned or in the possession of the royal family, the governing body. So it's not really terribly shocking that they're the ones that are okay with this. The second type is there is a mist that is blanketing the community. And if you go off into the mist, you could become infected basically by this magic. And now the magic is not contained to the card, it's within you. You're considered infected, you're kind of ruined at that point, and you will be killed. Elspeth was infected as a child, and her family sent her to live at her uncle's rural farm, basically to protect her and keep her from being killed. Well, she's now reached a certain age where she's got to go to court and be presented and, enter society. So she is basically now on a quest to figure out how to cure people who have been infected. The Serpent and the Wings of Night and The Ashes and the Star-Crossed King by Carissa Broadbent. This is The Crowns of Nyaxia. There is a third book that just came out. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, though. This is basically the Vampire Hunger Games. So this follows our main character, Oriah. She is the adopted human daughter of the King of the Vampires. I know that this sounds ridiculous, but I swear it works. So Oriah decides to enter the Kahari. This is basically a trial that is held every so often by the Queen of Death. Or I'm sorry, the Goddess of Death. She's a goddess. And whoever's the last person standing, the last being standing, I should say, will have their wish granted. So Oriah enters this so she can kind of raise herself up to a level to be, so she doesn't have to be so protected, because she is, of course, the weak, frail human amongst all of these vampires. So in addition to participating in all of these quests and trials, she also has to constantly be on the alert not to be, eaten basically by vampires. So this was really good, though. It's definitely bloody. It's definitely violent. There is also a really heavy romance theme through it that is great. So 2 thumbs up. Definitely don't know why I waited so long to read this one too. And book 23, so we've only got one more to go after this, is the game's God's Play by Abigail Owens. This is also one where I had to go out and buy the shelf trophy because I liked it so much. Look at those pretty edges. Ugh, so pretty. So as the name might suggest, this is another one with those trials and tribulations kind of elements, kind of that Hunger Games-esque type thing. Okay, so this follows our main character, Lyra, and Lyra has been chosen by Hades to participate on his behalf in the Crucible Games. So the gods don't participate directly. The gods basically have to take in a human delegate to participate on their behalf, and Lyra is chosen by Hades. So whoever wins the Crucible Games, that god then kind of becomes the king of the gods until the next Crucible Games, and the human will have riches and rewards heaped upon themselves and on their family. This is not necessarily a game to the death. It's not necessarily a last man standing, but there is a distinct winner. Okay, last but not least, book 24 in its own standalone category of horror, because I don't read horror. So I want you to tell you first up, the simple fact that I'm including this book tells you that it's really good, because I don't like horror. So I think this book would be really popular with fans of the TV show or the video game The Last of Us. So this is a post-apocalyptic novel. It's featuring a group of children. They're kind of in this remote, isolated camp. They are chained at all times. It's really pretty clear that they're not just there to learn, they are there to be studied. And our main student is a 10-year-old girl named Melanie. She's genius level. And from her teacher's perspective, she is the prize pupil. But from the researcher's perspective, she's kind of the prize research candidate. And as you read the book, you'll kind of begin to understand why the kids are being contained and why they're being studied. And it's post-apocalyptic. It's violent. There's some gore to it. And it did not at all end the way that I thought it was going to. All right. So anyway, that was it for my top 24 of 2024. So I thank you for hanging out with me. And so please, if you made it this far, please make sure to like and subscribe. And please let me know in the comments, what was your best read of 2024? And what read are you most looking forward to in 2025? All right, please have a safe and happy holiday season, and we'll be seeing you next year.
From cover to cover, she'll find every pearl. Welcome to Jenny Reads the World.